friends. Welcome to Sky House Herbs podcast. I'm Ashley Ellenboss, a clinical herbalist, and in this space, I share my knowledge and experience with plant medicine to help you on your own journey of healing and transformation. Join me in exploring the ancient wisdom of plant spirit medicine and how it can be used to heal the body, mind, and spirit. We'll talk to experts in the field and share stories from people who've been transformed by powerful plant allies. New episodes are released each Monday, so please subscribe. And now, let's explore this mystical world of plant medicine together. Hey everybody, welcome in. My name is Ashley, and today we'll be talking about the Divine Mother in Fire. This is going to be a dynamic discussion and a continuation of the series, The Divine Mother in Nature. And so far, we've covered the Divine Mother as she shows up in earth, the Divine Mother as she shows up in water. And so naturally, today we're going to dive into another element, fire. My hope with this series is to give you different ways of experiencing the Divine Mother archetype as she shows up not only in the elements, but in ancient gods and goddesses from long ago. Also to show how she shows up with the plants and in the herbs, and also through our emotional body. So in the first episode of this series, The Divine Mother in Earth, we talked about grief and land loss and displacement and how the goddess shows up there. And then we talked in the last episode, The Divine Mother in Water, about how water can heal and the intelligence that water contains in its own holy way. And now as we move into fire, we're going to focus on the prime element of desire. And desire has multiple faces and ways that it shows up, also ways that it can be suppressed or repressed or dead. And how does that teach us and instruct us for how to right the ship and how to get back on our horse, so to speak. And I'll be bringing in some different archetypal characters from both the Greek and the Roman traditions, and also from some of the more pagan European traditions as well. And some rituals using herbs and fire to create smoke. And we'll talk about why smoke is so important when we are working with spirit and working with the Divine Mother. So what I'd like to do is reclaim desire as sacred and explore it through some cards that I pulled from a favorite oracle deck of mine, and also to weave in the stories of ancient goddesses and mothers who held the sacred light of desire in a way that I think speaks to the heart of what so many of us are feeling a call to reunite with. So I hope this episode is helpful for you and that will ignite that flame of devotion inside of your own heart. And of course, before we begin, I have to say this every time. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please take a moment, click subscribe, click like, and share it with a friend if you think they'd like it. Okay, so thank you. Now let's begin. I'd like to first show you the 3 cards that I pulled from the Mary Magdalene Oracle deck that will be guiding the conversation. And I always pull these blind, right? I ask the question to the deck, give me 3 cards to help me speak about the different elements of the Divine Mother in Fire. The first card I got was the egg, and I just love how they speak. And in this card, you can see that she's holding an ember, a glowing egg at her heart. Isn't that just beautiful? So we'll talk about the opening. Where does this light come from? What does it embody? How do we begin this conversation? The second card that I pulled is the cave, and the sanctuary exists within is what this card says. And I spent a lot of time when I was in Italy visiting these ancient caves and these sanctuaries that were so holy and beautiful. And I want to talk about the cave image and the sanctuary within, the hearth that holds the flame, and why it's so important that we pay attention to tending this part of ourselves. And then lastly, we will circle to the second power. And this card tells us about a woman, a divine mother goddess figure in a boat full of refugees leaving the shore. But look at the helm. There's roses, the flower of the heart of devotion, leading the way through these somewhat choppy waters. And this second power is I trust what my soul desires. And that will be the third arc that we follow, because desire is the theme. And I love that this card came forth because of that word, desire, and not just desire for desire's sake, but for what the soul wants. Now, to start this conversation, I want to talk about the fire. And I thought that this image, the egg, everything comes from within, was very much attached to the burning heart of Mary. The first painting that I did was of the Black Madonna, and with the flame, the burning flame of her heart here. And this is such a beautiful image, I think, of that Vestal fire that burns inside of each of us. All right, let me set this down. It's huge. Okay. But this heart, this flame that lives inside, and actually, I remember when I was studying yoga that they call the flame that lives in the center of the heart Jyoti, and the Jyoti lives in the sacred dark cave of the heart. And one of my teachers explained that the brighter that light gets, it illuminates the walls of the cave and all the writings of the soul. The soul's desires and wishes and dreams for this lifetime and beyond are written in those dark walls of the cave. And the brighter our spirit is, the more we feed the flame of our devotion, the brighter it becomes. And then we can read those dark walls inside of the cave and know our purpose, know why we're here and how to live in this world in a way that's connected to our own dharma or our own life purpose and path. And I don't mean purpose and path as something loud. Our purpose and path can be very quiet. So when we work to build the flame of the heart, this egg, the seed in the heart, and we feed it with fire and desire, it can grow bigger and it can illuminate so much of what often feels like it is in shadow or in the dark. We know the qualities of fire are warm, it is drying, it is light and illuminating. We know that fire likes to go upward and spread outward. It is here to illuminate, and it is given its glory in the dark. When things are dark, when we light a candle in a dark space, the glory and the power of the flame can be fully acknowledged and can be given full appreciation. And it is no surprise that some of the greatest saints and seers and mystics in human history have been people who have come through very dark times, who were born into childhood sickness or tragedy, or had to battle demons of depression or isolation or neglect. And somehow were able to, from those dark spaces, carry that flame forward and illuminate it not only for themselves, but for so many around them. These mystics were teachers and guides that helped many other people find their way from darkness to the light. When I was on my pilgrimage in Italy, I was taken aback by the presence of the flame in many of the ancient churches, sanctuaries, and temples. And there would be these offering boxes. And I'd never seen this before. I also haven't been to church in a long time, but there were these big kind of machine boxes with all of these electric candles on it. And you could drop in a coin and then press a button. It would make this loud click. And then the light bulb would go on one of those fake votive candles. And I don't want to say fake, but it was, plastic and electric, right? And it would light up. So the idea is that people come in, and when they have a prayer, something that they want to ask for Mary's support with or to give over to God, they would say the prayer and then light that candle, and then the light would go on for that person or for that prayer. And in other churches, some of the older churches, there were actual little votive candles, and you could put a coin in and on your honor then light a candle with a match and say a prayer. And this practice of saying prayers with candles and with fire is so ancient. This act is thousands of years old and spans just about every culture. And part of what is beautiful about this offering of the light is it's creating a little beacon, a little focal point for both our spirits and eyes and for the spirits and the eyes of the divine. But also, one of the elements traditionally that was associated with the flame, the candle lighting, was the smoke that was generated. And the ancient Romans and Greeks believed that the way to communicate with the spirits was through smoke. And so sacrificial burning of incense like frankincense and myrrh, or in the jungles of South America, Palo Santo, or in other parts of the world like India, sandalwood, this burning of resins, and the burning of things like in North America, sage, ceremonial sage, the smudging, burning materials to create smoke was a way to also send the prayers up, to send our desires up. And what are prayers but desire? Even the tradition of blowing out a birthday candle came from this idea that when we blow out a candle, that we are then, that the wish is carried up to the gods in the smoke. Now we'll get to desire in a second, but I want to talk about smoke a little bit more, because this was also a big part of our trip in Italy. Was every morning we would wake up and we would have our breakfast, and then we would go and have a ceremonial opening circle. And Gail Faith Edwards, who was our amazing guide on this Italy pilgrimage, she would burn herbs from her own garden and resins that she loved. She would burn these, and we would all walk and smudge and cleanse ourselves before we would go to these sacred sites. And I could feel it. And my daughters, 7 and 10 years old, they loved that ceremonial act of clearing and sending wishes upward as well. And I think fire, as one of the elements of the Divine Mother, has this ability to carry things outward. And that brings us to the point that is a major thread of this talk, which is fire and its connection to desire. Because what does fire want? It wants to burn. It wants to consume. It wants more and more and more. And part of what we've been taught culturally as women is that desire is bad. If you desire too much, you're gluttonous or you're a slut. Or if you desire too little, then you're cold and you're rigid. And there's been very little play and room for the divine feminine to hold desire in her fullness. And it was interesting because when I was doing some research for this talk, I was reading from this book called Asteroid Goddesses by Demetra George and Douglas Block. And I had the great fortune of meeting Demetra at the Norwalk Astrology Conference just a few weeks ago, and I bought this book as a result. But in it, she talks about the asteroid Vesta and the history of Vesta as the virginal goddess. And it's interesting to note that in astrology, Vesta is given rulership by Virgo, who is the virgin, but she is also, in some traditions, is also given rulership by Scorpio. And so Vesta in some ways embodies these two polarities of the mother feminine, which is the virgin, right? The pure virgin, and then also the scorpionic, desirous woman. And even the glyphs of the virgin, she talks about how the glyph for Virgo has this M for the mother, but then the arrow goes inward. So it's this mother energy that's pointed inward. And then the glyph for Scorpio has that M mother symbol, but the arrow points out. So it's an external expression of the mother energy. So mother energy going in and mother energy going out, and both of them are mother. That mother energy must tend itself, and mother energy also must tend others. And with Vesta, who is an asteroid, but also an ancient Greek goddess, the daughter of Saturn, the first eldest daughter of Saturn. She was given the symbol, or she held the space of the mother who tends the fire, who tends the hearth. And the word hearth in Latin means focus or desire. So Vesta is the container of the feminine mother desire to both consume, to be consumed, and also to give and to share and to spread the light. And it's interesting because there's two goddesses that arose or kind of lived around the same time. And I think in I might be wrong on this, but I believe that Hestia was the older version of Vesta. And Hestia is the Greek goddess, and Vesta is the Roman adapted goddess, but they really are in many ways one and the same. It's interesting to note that both names share the same Proto-Indo-European root wes, which means to dwell or to burn. It is she who dwells in the flame. And it was believed that in everyone's home, in the hearth where the kitchen was, or the hearth was the kitchen, where the fire was kept and the coals were kept constantly burning, that's where Vesta lived. Vesta lived in that fire, in that hearth, the goddess literally present in every single home, and was the one responsible for cooking the food and cooking the pottery and providing the ash that was used in ceremony and many other things. And I remember when I was visiting my brother out in Ashland, Oregon, there was this really cool wood burning stove that someone had in their front yard, and it said Vesta on it. I guess that was the brand. And I was like, oh, how perfect. This wood burning stove is called Vesta. I mean, that literally is the goddess living in it. So if I wasn't across the country, I would have snagged it or asked if I could buy it from their junk pile in their yard as like a little reminder of Vesta literally living in the hearth. But I digress. So this idea of Vesta as desire, as the fire, as the maiden, as the mother, as the goddess, at the center of the home, at the center of our chest, at the center of our desire. This is why people, I think, become sick and ill when their inner flame goes out. And the flame can go out for many reasons, but we'll talk about what goes wrong in a little bit. So let's go back to the divine feminine and the divine mother in the element of fire. A few interesting facts about Vesta is that Vesta was rarely depicted in her human form. She was pretty much always depicted in ancient Rome as the flame itself. And this was later adapted into the Christian iconography of the flame on the heart of Mary, the burning heart of Mary, also called the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And those burning flames are showing the flames of devotion, the flames of desire. And desire and devotion, again, they're not separate. Another thing that's really interesting is that the Romans said, Vesta, this is in Latin, Vesta incipidium est, which means one must begin with Vesta. She was evoked first in every prayer before all other gods. She is the beginning, and she is the egg. Vesta is the egg. When we start a prayer, when we start a new endeavor, we should pray to Vesta. If we're asking for children or any new beginning, we can call to Vesta first. Her sacred eternal flame burned in this temple of Vesta in the Roman Forum. As long as it burned, Rome was considered to be protected. If it went out, catastrophe was believed to follow. So this is also flame as oracle. The flame was renewed every year on the calends of March, rekindling using burning mirrors to concentrate sunlight, the sun lighting the sacred fire anew. Her temple was circular, reflecting the ancient round hearth, representing continuity and wholeness. I want to talk for a minute about the Vestal virgins and their participation in these sacred practices of renewing the flame. These were called the Vestal virgins, and there were 6 priestesses chosen from patrician families, selected before the age of 6, and they would serve for 30 years. Their sole sacred duty was to keep the flame alive. They tended it with wood, herbs, and other materials using specific rituals and protocols. If the flame went out, the Vestal responsible faced severe punishment. They took this responsibility with absolute seriousness for over 1,000 years. Despite their vows, the Vestals held enormous power. They could vote, own property, hold state documents, pardon criminals, and Julius Caesar himself was pardoned by the Vestals in one case. But the interesting thing to note is that the greatest ongoing act of the Vestal Virgin ministry was giving embers from the temple fire to women who would carry them home to light their own household hearths. The sacred fire was passed woman to woman, home to home, and generation to generation. And this highlights this idea that fire wants to spread, it wants to be shared, and desire has to be acted out upon. Desire needs space to spread and to shine. And I want to say something here about the virginity piece here, because the Vestal virgins were not seen as having less power. They actually were considered to be brides of Rome. So they were married and coupled to the great city itself and were tenders of this flame as part of their devotional worship. And therefore they were given all of these rights and extra powers because of their purity and their devotion. There's a few other female fire keepers that I want to share with you. And one is Brigid or Brigid from the pagan tradition. She is a Celtic goddess of the Tuatha De Danann, daughter of Dagda, one of the most beloved deities in Irish mythology. Her name means exalted one, and she was born with a flame atop her head. She is the flame of the triple goddess. So her flame and her light runs through the maiden, the mother, and the crone. But unlike Vesta, she was not virginal. Her main space holder was that of the mother, and she was often called upon for childbirth, for protection in conceiving. She was also the caretaker and the keeper of cows and animals of husbandry, we call it, but it should be midwifery of the animals. So the caring for livestock, animals, land, and children all fell under Brigid's domain. And it's interesting because like Vesta, Brigid had her own sacred flame, and this was tended by the priestesses at her sanctuary in Kildare, Ireland. It's interesting to note too that much like Vesta was absorbed by Mary when the Christians came to Rome, the cult of Brigid likewise was absorbed into the worship as well. So Saint Brigid of Kildare retained the sacred fire and flame, and her protection of women and animals continued on in Ireland through the image of Saint Brigid of Kildare. What's really cool to know is that in 1993, a group of spiritual women symbolically rekindled Brigid's fire at Kildare, and it is still burning to this day. So if you're looking for a pilgrimage to the great goddess of fire, go to Kildare, Ireland, and feel and observe this ancient quality of tending the flame. So I want to just call our attention to the thread here of the divine mother, the divine feminine, being the flame keeper, the flame tender, the flame sharer. And it's so beautiful to note that these practices are still held in subtle ways today. For example, when I was in Italy, the way that Gail lit the ceremonial smudge and burned it every day for us, that is Vesta, that is Brigid, alive and well in our world. And every morning I light my little votive candle in front of my statue of the Madonna and give thanks and offer prayers and burn my incense. And so it's alive. It's alive and it's burning, and it is connecting us back to the sacred fire of devotion. So let's talk about this. What is this desire of devotion? And what happens when it goes wrong, when it gets off track? And this is going to tie to the sanctuary within, the cave card, because to tend the fire outside, first we have to tend the fire within. And so there's 3 states that I think embody what happens when the flame goes wrong, when desire gets turned around. The first one is when the fire gets suppressed, when we have a desire, when we know what we want, when our needs are clear, the light has shone inside the walls of the cave. We know exactly what we want, but we silence it. There's a lot of reasons why that might happen, but what will happen when we create that covering and we push that desire down is it turns into rage. And I did an episode a few weeks ago on feminine rage. So you can listen to that if you want to dive into this particular pattern a bit more. But there's a lot of good reason to be angry and to be upset with what's happening in the world today. But that rage can consume us. It can actually eat us alive. It can create all sorts of disease and dark patterns inside. So if we are not following our own truth and listening to that thread of desire to act, to do something about what our needs and desires are, it will consume us. And eventually it will put the fire out. It will burn out all of the kindling, all of the wood, until all that's left is ash. So you can see how that is what happens when the flame of desire gets suppressed and comes out sideways. Now, in the second state, what happens is that the desire gets cold. There is no fuel, there is no wood, there is no protection for that flame to even burn. We can think of this as the image of the cold, dead hearth. And this may have come from the woman who spent so much time caring for others, tending everyone else's flame and forgetting to tend her own. This is not the pattern of too much fire, but not enough, of not tending that inner spark and letting one's own desires go quiet. In my practice, I often see this as a person whose the sparkle in their eyes have gone dim. The fire of digestion has gone cold, and there is no want of anything. They are just sort of skimming by with the bare minimum. And this creates over time a quality of deadness. And even though these people at one point in their life may have been able to give so much and provided such warmth and inspiration, at this stage, when the fire has gone out, there is nothing to give. And now the third state is the tended fire. This is when the cave, the hearth, is glowing. There is a warmth emanating from the heart of a person. They are constantly checking in with themselves, saying, what do I need? What do I desire? And being able to even look out maybe 5 or 10 years, give themselves a little wood and know that spirit, they're going to be guided in that direction. And every day they're feeding that fire. They're moving in the direction of that devotional spirit inside. That is the healthy hearth. That is the healthy center. That is the woman or the person who has so much heat that they just walk into a room and they give it away and everyone lights up because of their fire. And maybe they even have so much fullness, they can literally give things away. They can offer herbs, they can offer practices, they can offer gifts, whether they're reciprocated in money or just in other ways. There's a quality of abundance that they can give, and they give with such joy. They give with such happiness and satisfaction and with such devotion. You feel like you're not just getting something from them, but you're getting an eternal gift of some kind. You're being given something that even when the object leaves, there's something in that giving, that egg that they gave to you, that ember that will never be lost. So I'm curious, after hearing about those 3 ways that the fire of desire lives inside of us, which one resonates with you? Do you notice yourself living in one of those three spaces? And maybe you're even in between spaces, but this is a good time to reflect on that quality of fire inside of your own heart. And where are you, right? Where are you in the process of learning to tend it and even learning to see it and paying attention to it? And that brings me to the next part of this talk, which is how do we tend that fire inside? How do we tend the desire by? And I think of this as a daily practice. This isn't something you can't just light a fire and walk away and just, it'll be fine. Fire's not like that. And neither is devotion. Devotion is something that requires daily watering, daily practice, and like a good fire, daily tending and feeding. So when you think about what's written on the inside of the cave of your own heart, what are the things that you desire? What are the things you love? What do you love to make? What do you love to do? Where do you love to spend time? What are your favorite places in this world? And are you feeding that desire? Are you feeding those places inside? Are you nurturing them every single day with your attention? And one thing to ask ourselves is not only are we tending this flame and how are we doing it, right? Is it through your own daily meditation practice? Maybe the way that you prepare your own foods in your own hearth. For me, I love baking breads and biscuits and sourdough. And so that is a way that I tend the hearth of my own literal kitchen in my own body and my children and husband's bodies is through cooking. So there's a lot of different ways that you can tend this. But one thing that's really interesting to note is that the tending of these sacred flames were never done alone. Remember that in Rome, it was 6 women who took shifts tending the flame because not one person can tend it all the time. And so that brings us to the question of who tends your flame when you can't hold it anymore? Do you have a network of people in your life who can hold the flame or fan it or feed it when you no longer can? And I think this is something that so many of us, especially women, are being called for. Like there's this deep calling and need for more community and not just online, which is okay. That's what we're doing right here, but actual embodied community where we get together with the flesh and the bones and music and song and vibration and food and drinks, right? And we gather and we share what's on our hearts. And maybe we're in a low space, but we have a friend who says, I have an idea. Why don't I bring you dinner on Tuesday night before you go to your doctor's appointment? And suddenly you're like, I didn't even know I needed that, but I do. And so it's when we are in community and we recognize the need to trade off holding that flame for one another in shifts that suddenly the load becomes a lot more bearable and easier to carry and easier to share. And if you don't have that community yet, pray on it. And I'm not kidding here. Light a flame every day and say a prayer. I pray to the Divine Mother, bring me like-minded souls, bring other flames of heart that are afire, bring them to me, surround me, introduce me to like-minded hearts so that I can feel that community. And it will happen. If your attention and focus and devotion and offering is sincere, it will happen. So I leave you with that as a little idea. And then I want to talk now about herbs and ways we can connect with the prayer smoke. And when I burn herbs, I typically don't burn one at a time, but I like to bundle herbs together and burn them sort of as a community event, right? Like rather than just inviting one person to a party, which is cool, I like to invite 7 or 8 people because then things really get mixing and the conversation within the smoke becomes more exuberant. And I wanted to share with you the herbs that I personally like to burn together. And you can take these and blend them yourself. Now, I also really like to burn the herbs that I harvest from my own garden or from my own land. But also this can be something, if you don't have access to this, is buying dried herbs from local growers, communities, from your local apothecary, and burning these as a smudge. The herbs that I like to burn, I have them in this little burning bowl. Can you see? Are a blend of some frankincense, resin, that's that kind of yellowy stuff. I really like to burn lavender, and lavender is really calming and soothing. So that's a nice one to add in. Frankincense is good for the crown chakra and for clearing the mind. It's also a great antiseptic, but I just like the smell, and I feel like it's very ethereal. It really feels like it opens up. It opens up my mind, and then the resin also helps the other herbs to keep burning. I also like to include rose petals. These are for the heart and also connect with that Marian thread of devotion and desire. Chamomile is in here. Those little yellow dots is a solar herb. It creates this beautiful smell, also relaxing, and it's soothing. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of mullein, the torch plant, clears the lungs and helps the breath and the voice all become more clear. Cinnamon is a nice one that I don't obviously grow because it's more of tropical, but adding a little bit of cinnamon can add warmth, sweet, and spiciness. And this is the flavor and the feeling of desire itself can be found in some of these spicier herbs. I also have a little bit of sweetgrass in this blend, but you can put them in a little dish like this and then burn it. And you can use a feather to really get it going. Oh, look at that. And then it can be used to help cleanse. I like to bring it up and over and then around my throat. But it can be used all over your body as a way to open up space, as a way to close space, and as a way to clear energy and send those prayers. Send the prayers and wishes up to the spirit realm so that they can be heard and received. You can also take any of these herbs and wrap them into a bundle. You can also add them into a seashell. That can be a nice receptacle for burning. Just make sure you don't leave it unattended, and always snuff it out before you leave the room. Now I want to close with a final card, the third card, which is I trust what my soul desires. So according to legend, Mary crossed the Mediterranean Sea to the south of France on a ship without sails after Christ's crucifixion in order to escape Roman persecution. 2 other women named Mary were on the ship, as well as a little girl named Sarah. And this card, the second power, talks about our work is to discern when it's the ego that's leading, when it's clinging to an outcome, and when the soul's desire is leading us in the direction of the soul's deepest needs. It's often terrifying to trust the soul because it's constantly leading us, challenging to trust the soul when it wants to go in a different direction, when it desires something new, because the soul is constantly leading us toward what's new, what's next, and what has never been done before. The soul wants us to be fully present because transformation only happens in the present tense. And again, I love in this image of the boat that there's roses at the helm, the flower of devotion, but also boundaries with the thorns, right? Opening, being fragrant, letting our beauty be seen, but also knowing that we have to have some of our cards turned inward, right? We need to have a cave that has protection, because with too much wind and too much influence from the outside, that flame will go out. So we have to tend to that desire. And once we're on the boat, then we have to surrender, like this boat with no sails, letting ourselves be carried by the desire to maybe these uncharted shores, but knowing that if we are following what is true to us, what is real inside of our own hearts, that we will never be led astray. And so in closing, as we meditate on fire, as we meditate on the Divine Mother in fire, in the hearth, in the home, the flame of the votive candle in a church, the image of the fires being carried from one temple to the home of the villagers, of taking turns carrying the flame and lighting the flame for one another, remembering that it is our work to tenderly and lovingly keep the flame alive and not allowing ourselves to suppress it, that the Divine Mother is not asking us to rage and burn ourselves out, but to tend quietly what is inside. And in that quiet inner tending of the sanctuary of the cave, the light will emanate out. The desire will be seen. The prayers will be heard. But none of that can happen if we don't have that sanctuary carefully guarded and tended in daily small ways. So I invite you to light a candle today, maybe burn some herbs in your own sacred way for yourself in your own hearth, bake something delicious for yourself or for your family, and think about the way the Divine Mother is calling to you through fire, through the flame, through heat and desire, and let yourself be moved by it and maybe even surprised by it. All right, that is all for today. Please leave in your comments what you think, your own thoughts, reflections on the Divine Mother and fire, and any images or stories that maybe others might benefit from. So sharing the coal from our own experience with others, just right here in the comments. So I'd love to see that and hear that. And stay tuned. We'll be recording the next Divine Mother in air in our next episode. So thank you, everyone, and see you soon.